My name is Michael Miron. During your opening talk, you showed us a chart with the budget deficit. I think it would be helpful to your constituents if you were to show the true deficit, because that's just the budget, but does not include the borrowings from Social Security. If you actually redo that, the total debt actually owed by the government to the public, you'll find that those four positive years are all negative. The closest you got, if you download the Treasury data by day, which I did earlier today, is minus $19 billion in the year 2000. And so you ought to be a little bit more candid with us. Secondly, it would be also helpful if you're going to talk about taxes versus spending, is to disaggregate that chart into revenues and expenditures, because the interplay between the two is what produces the deficit, and you really can't have an intelligent conversation about revenues and taxes just on the basis of the deficit. Last point is, if you look throughout the 20th century, we have never, as David pointed out in his opening remarks, raised more than 21% of GDP, with tax rates as high as 93% at the margin. So you cannot solve this problem if we're going to spend at 25% of GDP. There is no conceivable way that tax rates alone are going to close that gap.
Your points are all well taken. There is no conceivable way that taxes alone solve this problem. The tax rates required to solve this alone, with no growth and with no reform of our entitlements and no restriction of the budget, would be absolutely prohibitive, would crush the vitality of things. The number that does tell the story, because you can choose to look at the budget, as you know, in two ways. You can look at the actual expenditure budget, and you can look at how the Social Security borrowings. When the government borrows from Social Security, it is government-to-government borrowing. The number that does tell the truth, though, very, very clearly, is the total aggregate liability number there, which is the debt of about $13 trillion, and unfunded liabilities, which gets you up to a total of $62 trillion. The good news is, the vast bulk of that, the unfunded future liabilities, can be addressed. You got to pay back the debt. That's, $13 trillion. That number, by the way, includes the intergovernmental debt. So $13 trillion is the money we owe others and the money that the government owes itself. That we just owe. And then you've got the unfunded liabilities that we can alter through entitlement reform. Yes, ma'am.
No, you can't hear.
Anita Peters from Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I disagree on tax cuts. I think we do need tax cuts, and I think it is a hard call, but you're not going to get your revenues up simply by cutting the budget. I agree with you. I think it's going to require both tax cuts, but getting rid of the tax cuts, certainly a substantial amount of tax cuts. I disagree with, yes, I think that corporations do move and do not have loyalties, and they move for various different reasons. They've been moving for years. We have seen corporations shift to overseas for labor cost reasons. Do high net worth people move out of this country? Well, then they're unpatriotic. We live in the United States of America. Yes. Here in the United States of America, we enjoy more freedoms than any other country. If any high net worth person leaves this country and they retain their citizenship, as far as I know, they still have to pay taxes.
They can pay a one-time payment, please.
Well, they're unpatriotic, and they should be pointed out as being unpatriotic. Because as my father used to say, I earn enough. I'm glad I pay taxes, that I have a job and I earn enough. That's what we have with the progressive tax.
Dr. Anderson, you asked the specifics? Well, here's some specifics. I disagree with you about the stimulus. Government stimulus has been tried 90-plus times in 21 countries over the last 30 years. It has uniformly not done what it said it's going to do. But leave that aside. Only 60% of it's been spent. We are, of course, in a tepid recovery. That means there's $300 billion sitting there waiting to be spent by somebody for a slush fund. Give it back, pay down debt, $300 billion all at once. Second, I think you should repeal Obamacare. I think you could deal with things like pre-existing conditions and others in an incremental basis. And I believe it was also sold to us as a fraud. It was sold as $1 trillion or less, but that was with gimmicks. The start year was 2010 instead of 2011. That shaved about $100 billion off of it. The $500 billion in savings in Medicare is not going to happen. It's double counted as it is. The $50 and $70 billion respectively by introducing long-term care and the student loan program in there just to juice the perceived savings. Another fraud. 6 years of revenues and 10 years, 6 years of spending and 10 years of revenues also kept it down. So the true cost on a recurring basis is something on the order of $2.5 trillion over a 10-year period. Not counting the unfunded mandate on all of us, which is probably another $2 to $3 trillion. So I think an honest accounting of Obamacare is a $5 trillion increase in the cost of medical care in the United States. Repeal it and deal with the specific problems rather than a giant takeover. Next, Fannie and Freddie, which the Treasury Department convened on Christmas Eve, opened up the liability to unlimited on us taxpayers. Latest estimates, $400, $500 million, and I note now that some of the moves are to try and reinflate the housing markets, duplicating the same moves that helped contribute to the latest housing bust. That's probably worth another $400 billion. Stop the bailouts. I know you justified the education one the other day, but I would also point out that the rate of increase in education spending across the nation is about 4 times the rate of increase in the number of students. And all it's doing is delaying the day of reckoning, a little bit of belt tightening, some freezes on salaries, and nobody has to be laid off. Finally, a point about earmarks. Yes, they're small and measured by themselves, but they also grease the skids to allow votes to be purchased essentially on other big items. But you're all together, all the stuff I just got on the table, that's $2 to $3 trillion without even touching the long-term entitlements, which is a much more difficult problem.
Well, there's a lot of debate over the cost of the healthcare system and how and when the savings come, but there's not, you're unique in thinking that the cost is $5 trillion. You're unique by probably a factor of at least 3 relative to even the most aggressive or pessimistic assumptions.